This episode of Test Drive is brought to you by Elmec and their EV Duty Smart Home Charger. Anytime I'm planning an episode of Test Drive, I try to come up with a theme or a title for the episode, and I had two on the table when it came to this vehicle. The other option that I was going to go with was Mazda's BMW i3, because in a lot of ways, this vehicle is very similar to the BMW i3, but I ultimately settled on the fact that this is a compliance car. This, my friends, is the 2022 Mazda MX-30 GS. This is the entry-level trim sold here in Canada. The trims are a little different in the US, but you're basically getting the same thing. We have two options here, two different trims. The GT comes fully loaded, but this one will probably be more popular as it is more affordable and gets you the same range. This uses a 35 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery. It's front wheel drive only, has a 1-speed automatic transmission, and it's good for about 161 kilometers. Yes, my friends, that's right, a 2022 electric car with less than 200 kilometer range. Now, why is this such an interesting car? Well, this is Mazda's first electric vehicle, and not only is it their first electric, but it really is their first electrified vehicle as well. The industry is obviously moving towards zero emission vehicles and vehicles that can have some portion as zero emissions, i.e. plug-in hybrids. And up until now, Mazda hasn't had anything until the MX-30, so it's good that they finally have something. The thing is, though, it really does feel like a compliance car. Now, if you're not too familiar what that means, I own a compliance car. My 2018 Ford Focus Electric is essentially a compliance car. If we go into it a little bit, you'll know more, and we are planning to do an episode that really goes in to some of these early vehicles and goes over the idea of what a compliance vehicle is. But the gist of it is basically automakers have to sell a certain number of either fully zero emission vehicles or super ultra low emission vehicles in order to sell regular vehicles. Since Mazda has not had any sort of electrification options, it means they've had to buy credits from manufacturers like Ford in order to continue selling vehicles in North America, and specifically a place like California. So a compliance car is a vehicle that meets those minimum requirements to be able to sell the other vehicles they want by basically making the bare minimum electric vehicle possible. And there have been a long list of these over the history of time, and this is the latest one. Now, why do I say that? Well, because again, the range is pretty low and the price is kind of high at $42,000 Canadian or $36,000 in the US. I mean, this is somewhat pricey. And if you think back to my 2018 Focus Electric, that was about $35,000. So this is $7,000 more. And yes, you do get a lot of tech with this. This is LED lighting, rain sensing wipers, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, adaptive cruise control, which is actually really nice to find on this trim, lane departure warning, Mazda's excellent color head-up display, a backup camera, rear parking sensors, and a manual liftgate. You also have keyless entry into the vehicle, and because this is sort of a half-door setup, the front doors are full and the back doors are half doors, like we saw on the BMW i3 or, a little bit closer to Mazda, the RX-8. Yeah, you don't really have keyless entry to those doors. You have to open up the front ones. But the idea is you're getting a pretty well-equipped vehicle. It just comes down to that range, my friends, because my Ford Focus Electric has about the same battery, yet it is rated for more range. It's supposed to do about 185 kilometers. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about that on our road test. It is cold. As you can see, I'm wearing my winter jacket already. We've been averaging about 1 degree Celsius here all week as we've been filming this. So this vehicle has been getting out and about in very chilly weather. Not cold weather, but chilly. So we're going to see how the battery performance is, especially compared to my Focus Electric, as well as other electric vehicles we've tested, because that might be the thing. Perhaps Mazda is saying it only does 161 kilometers because they're being incredibly conservative with that number. So then that way, if you buy the car and you do 200 kilometers, you're happy. But then if you do 150, you're not as upset. So we're going to be talking about that because I have been driving it enough, and we'll see exactly how much range you're getting with this bad boy. Now, the exterior design of this is pretty similar to the CX-30 that we drove earlier this year. A little different and a little bit smaller proportions because the back seat space is smaller, but you have a pretty good sized trunk on here to be able to use it for daily things. There is no front trunk. In fact, the engine compartment is actually where the motor goes, and there's tons of unused space in there, which again kind of goes to my theory that this really is a compliance car, because they could have repositioned and maybe re-engineered how the electric motor sat in the bay and used the front as a frunk. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the only car that I've driven that uses a front trunk that is actually functional are the Tesla vehicles, because you can either open it from the infotainment system or sometimes open it from the key fob, making it actually easy to use that front trunk. With most manufacturers, though, they're still thinking in the traditional car sense that you have to pull the latch twice or once underneath the driver area to get into it. It's not very convenient if you actually want to use it as a cargo area. So Mazda just decided not to put anything there. That's fine. I'm not too upset about it because the back space is very good already. And since we're talking about the motor anyway, it is a 143 horsepower, 200 pound-foot of torque motor. It works pretty well. Overall, you're not looking to buy this as a performance vehicle. You want to be using it economically, so you're not going to be driving that fast with it, but you do have some pretty decent power numbers for a vehicle like this. Again, very similar to a second generation electric vehicle like my Focus Electric. Now, the interior is pretty familiar if you've driven any new Mazda vehicle. It feels nice. The cloth seats are comfortable, and even the back seat space is not too bad, despite the fact that there aren't full doors back there. I can fit there. I do fit behind the passenger seat, and I do have enough headroom. I am pretty much touching the top of the roof line, but it is comfortable enough. So if you did want to put adults back there, it is possible. Obviously, I'm a big guy, so your mileage will vary. But it has the 8.8-inch infotainment system that we've come to see on some of the other Mazda vehicles that has navigation, Sirius XM, and the backup camera in there. We also have the 7-inch digital gauge cluster computer, and then just above the floating center console is a 7-inch climate control screen, which is something that we're starting to see more and more from other manufacturers. We have heated front seats with a heated steering wheel, along with cork interior trim, which is kind of an interesting way to go about things. It is somewhat environmentally friendly. Some of the materials in there use recycled parts, and you can definitely feel it. And again, go back to the BMW i3, it feels a lot like that in some ways. So I do like the cork. You've got a place to be able to put maybe your phone or some small objects around the center console. If you flip up the little panels there, that's where your cup holders go. And you do have an armrest that you can open up for storage as well as slide out for a little bit more extra arm length. Now, if you end up going with the GT trim, you're getting a 360-degree camera, front parking sensors, emergency lane keep assist, front cross traffic alert, 18-inch rims, a moonroof, front adaptive LED headlights with the self-leveling system. This one is a manual leveling system on the GS, along with some other additional kit with it. So it's up to you whether you want to go up for it. I mean, $43,000 does sound like quite a bit for the overall range. You have to keep in mind that this vehicle here in Quebec qualifies for $13,000 in rebates. So it comes out to be about 30 grand. So you'd be looking at this or maybe a mid-level Mazda 3. So it depends on what you want out of it overall with this. And like some of the vehicles we've tested recently, we do have an independent McPherson strut set up for the front suspension, but the rear does use a torsion beam. Can I tell when I'm on the road? Not really. You know, it's an electric car. There's a lot of weight on this vehicle, and overall it works pretty well. So you're not getting a spirited drive with this. It is not a performance or sport-oriented drive, but it still does feel like what Mazda has been doing recently with their vehicles. You can tell that it is a Mazda when you're driving it on the road, which is what we're going to do now. I want to take this vehicle on the road. I want to talk about all the information you need to know from our testing when it comes to the overall energy economy and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for the 2022 Mazda MX-30 GS. Well, my friends, it is a crisp winter morning. Even though we are still in fall, it is like winter here. We woke up, it was -5 degrees Celsius, lots of frost on the ground, and in fact, yesterday was our first snowfall here in Quebec. There's nothing on the ground. It only lasted for about half an hour, but still, we are in winter mode, which is a good opportunity to test out this Mazda MX-30, because I'd say that the climate we're in right now is probably what a lot of people will experience as sort of their worst case. You know, if you live in southern Ontario, yeah, it'll get a little bit colder, but the idea is this gives us a bit of a better idea of how this electric vehicle can perform in the winter, or at least in colder climates. So let's talk about the important stuff here, range and the energy efficiency, because we've done a lot of testing with this already. I've been driving this car, had about 600 kilometers when I picked it up. It was brand new, basically, just was broken in, and now it's got almost 1,200. So I've done quite a bit, and I'm still not done my week with it, but the idea is I've gotten some good numbers. So first and foremost, our test loop, we completed our 100 kilometer test loop in 20.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. That was at about 4 degrees Celsius. So it's cold, it's chilly. Now, I usually keep my HVAC settings to 21 degrees on automatic. However, I found with this Mazda is sometimes, like right now, I've put it back into automatic and it's putting the heat on like the 5 fan motor speed, which is, you know, almost a little bit above half. It's too much, and there's been a couple days that I've turned it down. I've had it at about 20 degrees Celsius and manually just put it to either 1 or 2 for fan speed. So I'm going to do that now. It's down on 1 fan speed because I don't need that much heat in this vehicle. I feel that it pumps out quite a bit and I don't necessarily need it, but it was pretty chilly when we did that. Now, because I'm driving so much back and forth and I'm driving at, you know, colder temperatures than usual, right? I'm going in the evenings to and from my destination. It gives me a slightly different perspective of how this car handles the colder weather. So when I drove to Montreal Monday evening, I averaged a little bit more at 20.6 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and it was 2 degrees out. Now, at that point, when I got into the car, it told me I had like 170 kilometers of range. Yet, when I got to my destination, which is only 90 kilometers from home, I was down to about 20% battery. So you can do the math, that is nowhere near 170 kilometers. Coming home that night, 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, 0 degrees. And it was chilly out. Nighttime, driving a little bit quicker. That's the thing too, we talk about that when we do the electric cars. If you're on the road and you're driving on the highway and you're not slowing down for anything, you're just constantly using energy. Stop and go traffic is actually ideal because then you're actually recouping some. So, you know, I'll drive into the city. I'm averaging, for example, the next day was even more. It was like 24.7 kilowatt hours. But then when I got into Montreal, I'm in stop and go traffic for the last 20 kilometers or so, it drops down to like 22, mid 22 kilowatt hours. So the idea is, you know, if you're buying this because you live in the city, I think you'll be okay. If you're doing a lot of in-town commuting and things like that, it should be fine. But as of right now, we're not seeing that 160 kilometer range, and that makes sense. You know, we always see a dip in the winter months, but you know, we're seeing about, you know, between 130 and 140 on average. Right now, I'm at 90%. 90%. I drove my daughter to school. It's like a 3-4 kilometer drive round trip, and it went down 8%, and then just 2% more here driving. So it is a small range. You're going to be losing a lot of range because it's cold out if you live in a climate like this, so it's unavoidable. But yeah, I mean, when I'm coming back from where I go to class, yeah, yesterday, for example, I had 92% range because I don't have a charger where I'm going, and I came home and I had 23% range. So used up quite a bit. It's getting into that danger territory, and it makes me a little worried. So keep that in mind. We expected that. I just hoped that maybe Mazda was underrating their range so that it would be a little bit closer. And I'd say so. I mean, if you think about it, you know, 160 is what it's rated for. And if I'm only getting 130, it's a better percentage than my Ford Focus Electric, which is rated at 185, and I get 120. So I don't know. I mean, it still uses quite a bit of electricity. You know, my Focus, when I drove it a couple weeks ago, it was doing about 19 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And yes, I know it has gotten colder out, but last week we drove the Volvo XC40 that has 2 motors, all-wheel drive, and it wasn't using a whole lot more. It was using, you know, 24, 25 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in very similar temperatures. So the energy efficiency on this isn't great yet. And that's the thing that goes back to the title of this video. Is this truly just a compliance car in order for Mazda to continue selling vehicles and not have to buy EV credits and not have any issues selling them in certain markets? And I still have to say yes. I mean, I know that they did a good job with it. I know that they wanted to make a good electric car, but it's a good electric car with a very limited range. And I understand that there is a market for people who don't necessarily need a lot of range. If you're buying this because you really just go in town, you don't necessarily go on the highways, you maybe have a second vehicle that you can use if you need to go further than 160 kilometers, then this would be okay. The price though, depending on where you are, it might be worthwhile. Here in Quebec, I can see it being popular. $43,000 for this. You get quite a bit of kit. $13,000 rebate. Bam, you're looking at 30 grand out the door. Not too bad, you know, plus delivery and taxes and everything. So it goes back up, but it is still quite a bit more affordable than some of the other electrics out there. So there you go. I'm not going to talk about the range anymore, because I've said my piece. Let's talk a little bit about how the vehicle performs, drives, and sort of the interior stuff on this. First of all, I really like the look of this. It's a nice looking crossover, and we just happened to pick this up the same day that Mazda announced their new CX-50, and I see that there are some design traits on the outside that are similar between the two vehicles. I do like this evolution of Mazda's design language. It's not really changing things up too much. It's just adding to what was already a very good design. So I like the look of it. The functionality so far for me has been good. You know, as I mentioned, I can sit beside myself, not behind, but beside myself in the back seat. It's all right. I do have enough headroom and easy enough leg room. I mean, for the size of the vehicle, it's not too bad. My daughter, very comfortable back there. She likes the little suicide doors on the back, so it's kind of interesting there. And then again, the trunk space is good. So I think the functionality of this will work for people. Interior is nicely laid out. I like the way that it is set up. It's very simple, nothing over the top. Comfort is good too. I do like the cloth seats. I do feel I'm a little tight in here. The door paneling is just a little thicker, especially the further down you go. So for me, I have to kind of put my arm in a slightly awkward position, but I'm a big guy, right? So that's not uncommon for smaller vehicles, but keep that in mind. Aside from that though, I mean, I have quite a bit of headroom here because we don't have the sunroof, so you do get a little bit of extra headroom. So comfort's good, space is good on this, and the overall interior very nicely laid out. Similar in a lot of ways, like I said, to the CX-30 and also to the Mazda 3. I think that it is a good effort for them. I'm hopeful that we'll see more, as Mazda mentioned in their CX-50 announcement that they will have a hybrid option for that vehicle. They didn't really go into details, but it did sound like a plug-in hybrid would be offered. And as I was mentioning, how I was thinking of calling this a BMW i3 clone, or at least Mazda's version of it, and this vehicle should be getting a range extender option. And it's interesting because it will use a rotary engine that will only generate power for the electric system. So perhaps that could give some people some options too. There's so much space in the engine bay, you could definitely fit a small little generator in there to give you a bit of extra range should you need it. So there's some options coming down the road for this, some options coming down the road for Mazda in general. I hope to see more electric offerings from them, because I think that a vehicle like this, just with significantly more range, would be very compelling for my life. But let me know in the comments below what you think of the 2022 Mazda MX-30. Are you like me? Do you think that the range is just not enough and this is a compliance car? Are you confused like I am about all the naming conventions? They probably could have come up with something much, much better than the MX designation for this. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this vehicle. I try to get back to everybody I can. Give a thumbs up to the video if you liked it, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.